On the morning of October 31st, there is a small snowball on the street. And the houses are already decorated with unusual balls and garlands with painted scary faces and ghosts. Of course, there were pumpkins with carved eye sockets and crooked grins. Soon, Halloween, one of the most beloved holidays of children and many adults, will be celebrated in all countries of the world. Pumpkins will light up with bright lights, protecting people from evil spirits raging that night and telling lost souls the way to purgatory. Jack himself closely monitors that this custom is carried out. Such a pumpkin has long been called Jack's lamp. Is it worth believing in all this? It's up to you. But maybe it's still in my power to save you from misfortune. I don't know, but I'll tell you a dark story, and maybe you won't ignore the rules of Halloween. An ordinary small house stands next to the same ordinary houses, but it is distinguished from them by its drabness and plainness, probably because it is not decorated like others. The owners of the house didn't even bother to put a pumpkin guard. Maybe they weren't up to it at all. Alice, a little girl, is lying in her crib. She is very ill and rarely gets up from it. The girl's mother, Mary, works in 2 shifts to provide her sick daughter with all the necessary medicines. The woman is severely sleep-deprived and malnourished. There are black circles under her eyes, and her face has aged considerably. Although Mary is only 27 years old, she gave birth to her daughter due to her youth and stupidity at 17. Alice's father never confessed to the involvement of her birth, as he disappeared, and has not yet appeared. Mary was raised by her grandmother, and after her death, the woman was left a complete orphan, but she had a daughter whom she loved even more than her own life. Mary didn't care about fun and holidays, decorating the house and carving lamps out of pumpkins, but still with the last money she bought sweets for her daughter. Although I had to give up warm winter boots, but the joy of a child is much more expensive. The woman wholeheartedly believed that everything in their lives would get better soon, that the black streak had just dragged on a bit. That day didn't go well in the morning. Mary had a fight with an elderly neighbor, a grumpy old woman. Susan yelled at the woman because she didn't bother to put the pumpkins on. Susan then uttered a prophetic phrase. "All this will go sideways for you." "Oh, sideways, the devils will descend on your house. Remember my words again, Mary put this unpleasant incident out of her mind and in the evening, kissing Alice on the forehead, trudged to work the night shift. Prudently, having persuaded Susan, sometimes look in on Alice and check on her condition. On the way to work, the woman had a bad feeling, but she didn't dwell on it. Alice was sleeping restlessly, tossing and turning and saying something in her sleep. She was probably having nightmares. The girl's forehead was sweating, and she had a slight fever. She was hugging an old teddy bear with one hand, and clutching the edge of a tattered plaid with the other. It was already dark outside and the festive festivities were buzzing with might and main. Children dressed up in costumes, went from house to house and asked for sweets. No one knocked on Mary and Alice's door, as everyone knew they were poorer than church mice. Suddenly, someone knocked on the window uncertainly, as if asking if anyone was at home. The girl winced, but did not open her eyes. She was too drawn into the realm of Morpheus. A few minutes later, the sound was repeated, but the knocking was already louder and more insistent. Alice shuddered and opened her eyes. Maybe Mom's back. Did she forget the keys? The girl thought, and, swaying from weakness, got out of bed. I looked through the window, but I didn't see anyone behind it, only the lights were shining everywhere. Alice sat down on the bed and hugged her knees. Suddenly she felt very scared. She closed her eyes and tried to calm down, but then there was a knock on the door. The girl jumped up and ran to the front door. There was no peephole, and after a moment's thought, she opened it. There was no one on the porch, just a faint breeze blowing from the street into the house. Alice closed the door and went back to her room, and then strange things started happening. First, the vase on the bedside table shook and fell, shattering, then the curtains fluttered. The girl was very scared and rushed under the blanket, as if it could give her protection. She clutched the bear in her arms and began to cry softly. Everything happened in an instant, a sharp pain in her chest and an emptiness. As if Alice's consciousness had passed into the background, and someone powerful and immaterial had taken over the first one. Mary frantically called her daughter, but no one answered the phone. Suddenly, Alice called her herself and a childish, much-loved voice sounded on the phone. "Mom, come soon, The connection was cut off, and Tatiana could no longer reach the girl. The woman, without warning anyone, left her watch and rushed home. 20 minutes later, she was knocking on the door, but no one answered. Finally, She found the keys in her bag, and opening the lock with trembling hands, fearfully entered the darkness of her own home. Mary quietly went into the nursery and saw that Aliska was lying on the bed, covered with her head. The woman came up and stretched out her hand to pick up the edge of the plaid. And then she saw it. Instead of eyes, her daughter had deep dark hollows, and her mouth was twisted into a black grin, like a Halloween pumpkin. A knife blade flashed in the child's hand, which a moment later sank deep into the mother's chest. Mary opened her mouth, but only made gurgling sounds, and a red trickle of blood ran down her chin. And the little girl said in a voice not her own, "This is for you for neglecting Jack's lamp." And in the last seconds of her life, Mary saw her daughter slit her own throat, and her face regained its true appearance. Jack's spirit came out of the already dead body of a little girl and went in search of other people who foolishly do not follow the rules of Halloween.